the neighborhood of focus is downtown Lockport. Two more things. I'd like to thank our guest speakers, Laura Hackathorn and Jeff Felt, for being with us today. We love outside input. We love the commentary that comes from those who aren't as familiar with Lockport, but who understand the importance of urban places, big, small, and anything in between. I'd like to thank so many of the other people that have helped today. Jessica Diddley from Lockport Main Street, who our Unlock Lockport group is doing this presentation with. I'd like to thank Brian Smith for being here from Lockport Community Development and the Greater Lockport Development Corporation. And any of the rest of you who I may have missed, you'll be recognized as the day goes on. Secondly, since today is about what you, the public, have to say, I'll leave you with another quote from Jane Jacobs. Please look closely at real cities. While you are looking, you might as well listen, linger, and think about what you see. So before the day is over, we'd like each of you to comment on what you have thought about and seen today. With that, I'd like to introduce the director of Lockport Main Street, Jessica Diddley.
Where's Jessica? Where's Jessica?
Everybody assumes Colton's my husband because he helps me with the baby. So thank you all for coming. I just wanted to give you a quick background on what Lockport Main Street is as an organization and what we aim to do in the city. We're a not-for-profit, so we're not directly affiliated with the city, but we work closely with them. We have like a two-part mission. One is to assist and represent our business owners, and so we can be a liaison for the city and our business owners. We offer education classes and networking for our downtown businesses and our tourism businesses. Additionally, what we're striving to do is build a stronger community of Lockport from the bottom up, from our community members, and encouraging people to become champions of the city and to be part of our downtown district, because without that downtown nucleus, we really don't have an identity as the city of Lockport. We run programs such as our James Walks, we have our community market, and other opportunities for the community members to get out, meet our business owners, and be part of the fabric of what makes Lockport. So I encourage each and every one of you, if you have any questions, ideas, or interest in what we do, please feel free to reach out to Colton and myself. One of the two of us is always around, and we'd be happy to give you some opportunities to be part of our organization or just to know a little bit more about what we're doing. I'm going to just plug our next event. Well, I have a microphone in front of me. Josh from Oath is here today, and I just wanted to let you all know that on June 13th, we're going to be doing a clean sweep of the downtown Main Street, the corridor we're walking, and we encourage if anyone wants to join us that day. We'll have information on our Facebook page and on our website, but we're going to be going from Washburn to Transit and cleaning and sprucing it up and getting some plantings in and really making it a beautiful downtown for the summer months. So Josh, thank you for working on that, and it's going to be a great opportunity to meet your fellow activists in the community. So thank you for being here this morning.
Okay, I guess it's up to me to do final intros. My name is Chuck Banas. I'm a member of Partners for Livable, Western New York. I met Kevin because we're both board members of that organization, and we work for walkable and livable communities in our region. And we're hoping that Lockport can become the next Renaissance story throughout the region. And this is what this event really is all about. As you might tell, I'm battling a cold right now, so my voice is in and out. Those of you that know me probably will be thankful that my remarks will be very, very short as a consequence. So, I just wanted to thank Laura and Jeff for being here. I'm looking forward to their presentations. I haven't seen Laura's in forever, and I've never seen Jeff's, so I'm looking forward to see what he has to say. They're doing some fabulous work in Hamburg and Olean. I'd like to thank, of course, Kevin for inspiring me to come here to Lockport, and Lockport Main Street, obviously Jessica and Colton, and the other members of partners that are here to observe and help out, and hopefully participate in this great day. We're going to have a day full of education, some exploration, and some camaraderie, hopefully, by the end of it. So with that, we're going to kick off here with Laura Hackathorn from Hamburg, and after which Jeff Belt will speak. Each will have about a half-hour apiece, and then we're going to do combined Q&A and discussion afterward. And we may, depending on how things go, we may even catch up to our schedule. I think we're running about a half hour behind, but there's a lot of flex time built in. So
no, we're only 7 minutes behind right now.
All right. Thank you, Jerry. Okay, and just a quick note on the itinerary. You're going to have to shift these times by about a half hour or so, but again, maybe we'll catch up. So after the Q&A, we have a break, and then we'll do a group formation. Depending on how many people want to stay for the walks, we may have looks like we may have 2 or 3 groups. The groups will be about 10 people or less each. And then we're going to ask for some volunteers too, people that really know and love downtown Lockport. Combine you with a docent from Partners who has a kind of some expertise in urban planning issues and urban design issues. So hopefully we'll have a balanced discussion on the walk due to that as well. And don't forget to mark up the maps too after the Q&A. The places you love and the places you don't love in along Main Street and in downtown. We're going to compare that with your thoughts later in the day. But it's always good to see, and you guys can report even back to yourselves to see what your fellow community members and neighbors love and don't love. Usually it's pretty consistent. Everyone knows the places that are great and places that are not so great in their community. So don't forget to do that. We're going to have time after the break to do that. The maps are out in the hallway there. Use either map. We have 2 of them just so people wouldn't be crowding around a single map. So I think that's all the logistics I've got here. With that, I'd like to bring up Laura Hackathorn from Hamburg.
I am so honored to be here today. I'm so excited as I drove into Lockport to see the beautiful architecture you have here, and the word that came to mind is authentic. And you really have so much to work with here. I think you're just poised and you're at the precipice of something amazing. I feel the momentum in the room, and I want to relate to Jessica while you're speaking today. I remember in 2001 when I first got involved in the village. My children were very small. I just bought a house in the village probably about 2 years prior, even though I grew up there my whole life, but I did buy a house a block from Main Street. And I used to have meetings in my kitchen. Because my kids were, I had a video plugged in because I just wanted them to be quiet for an hour. And then from there, a little bit of background. We're on this Main Street. It was called the Route 62 Revitalization Committee, the same idea. And my fellow member said, there's a position opening up on the village board, and we'd like you to run. And, well, that was crazy. I'd never thought of that before. But here I am 15 years later, still on the board of the Village of Hamburg as a trustee. Let's see. Where am I pointing? To advance here? Oh, cool. Got it. Thank you. Village of Hamburg. Before we get started here, I want to say we took advantage of an opportunity because many people say, where do you get the money? Route 62, our main street, is a state road. And so as you keep up on projects that are coming into your community, for example, maybe the state's going to redo an intersection or a strip of road, you jump on that opportunity and turn it into a traffic calming opportunity. So that's how we got started. That's where the money came from. Also, a foundation of this whole thing, keep in mind, does your community have a up-to-date comprehensive plan? Is Smart Road built into it? That's essential because that gives you the permission, it validates all of your efforts because that's a community document. Hopefully it's on your community's website. You can read through that. And it will back your arguments. Hopefully there's smart growth in there somewhere. If not, it might be time to update your comp plan. And the other thing is our community was absolutely a grassroots opportunity. And that's the only way that we are able to accomplish all that we have. It's up to all of you, planting seeds as you go. So, Village of Hamburg, New York, if some of you haven't been, we're about 20 minutes south of Buffalo. The town of Hamburg is on the lake. The village is like the egg yolk in the center of Hamburg. We have about 10,000 residents. Our median income is about the same as Williamsville, although on a recent grant application, Williamsville got it, we didn't, and they said that we weren't, downtrodden enough, which was shocking, so I guess you get enough momentum and they think you don't need the money anymore. So, Dan Burden, I don't know if any of you are familiar with Dan Burden, some of you should be, came to the Village of Hamburg upon the request of our then mayor, who saw him speaking, because the DOT was going to come in and do full depth road reconstruction from storefront to storefront on our main street. Now you'll see later that our main street was not pretty at all. We had lost a lot of businesses due to the McKinley Mall in Hamburg in the 70s. And so the state was coming in to redo the street, and we invited Dan Burden in to show us an alternative to the DOT's idea of widening the roads, put in left turn lanes, traffic would then go faster, and we were already losing our business district. And his idea was, let's make it a people place. So this is a couple years old, so the trees are more mature, but that's our main intersection in the lower left of Main and Buffalo Street, and that's Main Street on the right. I'm happy to say that we have a historic Main Street, National Historic. You can see our roundabout there at the bottom. So Main and Buffalo, there's the before picture on the lower left. Shocking. I didn't even realize we looked that bad. It's like you walk by the chipped paint on one wall in your house for years, almost forget that it's there. So we decided wholeheartedly after seeing the Smart Road presentation, traffic calming presentation, that we needed to make our main street like your living room. This is an extension of your home. This is your living space. You need to design it completely for people, which kind of blew the DOT's mind at that time in history. The DOT was about moving traffic. They were about traffic counts. And we're about, this is our home. And traffic is necessary, but people take priority. So this is just an example. This is not from our main street because we didn't want to out any property owner and make them feel bad. So one of the very, very important things, building blocks. Okay, so you will apply for grants because you'll need money to do anything. So this is like a recipe for success to build an inviting place where investment will come. One of the things you need are design guidelines. Does Olean have architectural design guidelines yet? Yes, they do. Olean, I'm sorry. Does Lockport? does Lockport have design guidelines? Any government person? Anyway, one of the things we did is hire a planner. We hired Bob Corby, who is the mayor of Pittsburgh. Not sure he does that anymore. But what design guidelines do is when you're successful and investment finally comes, people are going to want to build and improve their storefronts. And God forbid, someone put up this ugly, drive-it, slathered building over this gorgeous brick architecture. Believe me, you don't know what you're missing until it's gone. You don't know what you have till it's gone. So our design guidelines in the Village of Hamburg are on our website. Please look at them. Hire a planner. Design guidelines, I cannot tell you how essential. If you're successful enough to get Main Street grants or grant money to improve your buildings, you will score better with design guidelines because they're competitive, or with design guidelines. And believe me, you want the people redoing, you're entrusting them, and it's their property, but at the end of the day, you want your Main Street to look beautiful and historic and retain that character. So design guidelines, be prepared for investment. In these, you can see obviously the windows on the left, storefront, and the right, they've been allowed to cover up their windows. You can, I mean, it's obvious what the better choice would be. The pedestrian experience. Pay attention to the pedestrian envelope. This is about making people feel comfortable and welcome on your Main Street. And it's literally an envelope. 5-foot wide sidewalks, ADA compliant, nice and smooth, no tripping hazard, invites strollers, people walking their dog, inviting for people. Shouldn't be a cracked mess, okay? The village also invests in sidewalk snowplows. We do that as a village because we have to put our money where our mouth is. If we want you to walk, we have to keep the sidewalks clear, and our DPW starts in the center of town and slowly moves to the edges. So Main Street, Business District, and schools are first, and then we start moving out to the less crucial areas. So continuing the pedestrian envelope. 0 setback or close to it, storefronts, 75% glass, and I borrowed this next phrase from someone, so you are theater for each other. So you as a pedestrian can look in the glass, and the folks who are working inside can look outside. Then we have awnings, we have the perpendicular signage, again for pedestrians, not for cars going 45 miles an hour. We have street trees with the canopy, we have street lights, the poles, we usually have planters, and all of this makes, doesn't this feel comfortable to you? You know, nothing's worse than walking on a sidewalk that abuts the street and cars are flying by and there's no street trees and the building's way back because you have a 7-Eleven and the parking lot's next to you. I would not want to walk there. So don't underestimate this design. School kids and biking. We have neighborhood schools. Folks in Lockport, do you have neighborhood schools? Do kids bike and walk to school? That's awesome. That's one of those charming things that you want to preserve, I assume. So the schools jumped on board, they put out more bike racks, we certainly encourage it. The Village of Hamburg also has crossing guards. Now, you might think that's quaint, that went out in the 50s, but no, it's a contributing element to the charm of the village. And as a mother, I would keep one baby sleeping in his crib, and I'd walk out to the driveway and I'd wave to the crossing guard. She'd say, I have her, and I'd send my kindergartner off to the crossing guard. She'd see her, my daughter would wave, and I knew that my daughter was being shepherded to school. That's a beautiful thing. You don't find that everywhere. It's worth it. These ladies that work And gentlemen that work, a couple hours a day and make what they make, believe me, it's value. So, well-maintained sidewalks, I touched upon that, public-private partnership. One of the things, as leaders in this community, all of you in this room, I consider a leader in the community, is sharing these ideas. And we have businesses that, when they redid their building, put in heated sidewalks. Now, a few businesses have done that. And I'll tell you, Erie County has a high percentage of elderly. And we have folks that have senior living facilities behind Main Street, and they walk. And that's quality of life. When all of us get to be elderly, I don't want to live off of a thruway in an 8-floor building, and the only way I could get out is to drive, and guess what? I wouldn't be that good at driving anymore. And I have to pull out onto traffic, and it's 55 miles an hour. So these folks can age in place, and they can walk, and they can shop, and spend money. It's good for your economy. And it's good psychologically. You talk about healthy community, right? Healthy community is about grandparents and children and parents all being in the same community. It's this lovely balance. And it keeps everybody, honest, doesn't it? So value folks, and maybe heat your sidewalks. So zoning for Central Business District. Take a look at Lockport's zoning. Do you allow outdoor dining? Do you allow, or do you require first floor glass, like a lot of glass? You can't fill in the glass. It's more of a design guideline thing, but we actually say 75% of your first floor has to be glass. Just has to be. We also require density. We want upper floor living. We want that old Main Street formula that worked forever, until past generations altered from it, of folks living above and patronizing the businesses below. And therefore, there's lights on after 5. If you encourage downtown living, now there's lights on after 5. You're not going to walk down this deserted Main Street where all the lights are out. That's creepy. Like, nobody wants that. So build for people. I talked about the window glass, 0 setback, and outdoor dining. Actually, I have to, just a side note, being that stay-home mom that went to a local meeting about Route 62 reconstruction and wound up having meetings in her kitchen, the trajectory on my life is completely different. So I'm a trustee, but now I felt like Main Street was really something I was invested in. So the little red perpendicular sign in the middle, that's my lady's boutique. So now I'm completely invested. So we're talking about, I see some was chopped off there on the left. When you go through your design guidelines and your zoning for your community, make sure it makes sense. I mean, for years we did what was happening in the lower left, parking spaces abut people spaces. Well, cars and people aren't friends that way. Yeah. So what we do now in the village of Hamburg is we require a green buffer. Now, if cars were going 50 miles an hour, it's not going to save anybody's life, trust me. But how does this make you feel? Bob Corby, the person I spoke to about earlier about our design guidelines, took me on a walk through the village of Hamburg at the very beginning. And he would stop me and say, how does this feel to you? And, that used to sound kind of, like who really thought of that? How does it make you feel? But that's exactly what I'm asking you to do. So as you go through your beautiful city, walk around and say, do I feel threatened here? Are trucks going too fast? Am I too close to the street? What can I do to make myself feel better? Don't underestimate that. So in the lower left, this is our intersection of Legion Drive and Buffalo Street. Now, Charlap's is on the right, you'll see the little cone, and behind Nick Charlap's is J.P. Fitzgerald's. Sometimes some of you know, you've heard of J.P. Fitzgerald's restaurant. So we went on a major asphalt road diet. That huge intersection with those ugly wires crossing the roads, swinging in the wind, you know, believe me, a school is on the left-hand side, Hamburg High School, Hamburg Middle, and then there's residential to the right. And these kids could walk to school. Well, I'm not going to let my kids cross that intersection. They'd be taking their life in their hands. So what does that mean? I have to drive them. They miss out on that experience of being independent, of stopping to get ice cream on the way home. And something happened. The cars and roads took too much of our life. Little by little took our independence. So the big picture on the right is we completely redid that intersection. There's the same ice cream stand in the right. So what we did is we actually changed the road. We have a cul-de-sac next to the ice cream spot. So, and we rerouted the road into a roundabout. We made this a safe, beautiful place for people of all ages to come and have ice cream, and now these kids cross at a roundabout. And the culture has so changed in Hamburg that they stop. And if some folks aren't from Hamburg, we still teach people, stop, make eye contact, make sure the cars stop and see you, then cross. You're not gonna play chicken and just say, well, I'm a pedestrian, I have the right of way, I'm just gonna cross. That would be silly. But you can so drastically redesign things to make it work for you and your children. Design for the weakest among us. Design for the elderly and design for children. And then we all win. This is that same, let's see, that's the same little place I showed you in the upper picture. What we've done is we've integrated our history. We're next to that ice cream shop was an old trolley tracks. So the community came together, we had volunteers, and they built that beautiful shelter. We also added amenities like that's a library, that little box. So it's take a book, leave a book, and we have them all over. And the local high school, talk about partnership. The kids in high school built those, and they are so proud. So partner up with your wood shop or your tech people over at the school. That's something that, what a great idea. The school presented us, the municipality, with that idea. People have these on their lawns in residential areas near the sidewalk. And it says something. It, just like public art says something about your community, that you value art and education and beautiful things, and it's a quality of life statement. Having books for anyone to take says something too. The DOT, when we did our road project, I didn't go into this. So here we were, this group back in 2000, 2001, this community group that were looking at road alternatives. The DOT, they were resistant to traffic calming road design. No one had done it yet in the area. But we had an amazing group. We did our homework. We traveled everywhere that we could in day trips in our cars. And this is before Pinterest. We take photos, and we put together 3-ring binders, and we do photos of a wish list, almost like a scrapbook. We go to Elmwood Village in the city, in Buffalo, we take pictures of the planters. We go to Niagara on the Lake and take pictures of gardens between the street and the sidewalk, and we brought all these things together. And I'm so happy to say we inspired the DOT. We inspired them so much that they found more money for our project. We inspired them so much that they said, why don't we add a game table? Why don't we put these, high-end bike racks? why don't we make an overlook for you? The Village of Hamburg's reason for being is water. There's recreation in the creek. But it had so overgrown that you didn't even see the creek. You didn't know a creek was there, quite literally. So the DOT said, well, why don't we put an overlook? Why don't we put in stairs that access the creek? Hopefully I'll get to that. There'll be more pictures on that down the road. So we have this beautiful amenity, and who would have thought the DOT would be inspired by this little group in the Village of Hamburg with 10,000 population? So, as I said earlier, beautiful is important. The DOT put in the gardens on the lower left, and then gardens started springing up even more than they ever were. People will be inspired. The momentum will grow. This is the overlook. This was the DOT's idea. This was on their dime. So this is on our main street. The trees were completely grown. You couldn't see this at all. And, kids would hang out in there and, do what they do. And so now we have these lovely stairs, and we have a recreational trails task force that are trying to connect and make paths all along the waterway. From the Boston Hills, Boston to the town of Hamburg Edge, all the way following the creek to Lake Erie. And so we have partners, and we have a whole group working on this in a beautiful plan. The nice thing is, you try to dovetail and work with other municipalities, it gives you more leverage, more clout. Erie County also talks about beautiful paths that connect everything. So sometimes it's great when you're trying to find support for your argument to look in the county and look in the state and see what their plans are, because that will add leverage and weight to your argument. So again, another step in our journey. The building in the lower left is our Cronenberg building. Over 100 years ago, that was a shopping place with residential upper. That building was, the windows were all closed in. Someone bricked in the windows, and they patched in these tiny little windows. The building on the east elevation was collapsing due to some poor construction decisions. We were in risk of losing that building. The Tetzel brothers out of Buffalo came in and were inspired because one of their employees was from Hamburg. And they said, we have a building you should look at. Nick Tetzel came in, bought the building, partnered with the village. We helped them. How can we get money for you? So we applied for a Main Street Historic District, and they were able to get tax credits, which really made the project a go. So it's those public-private partnerships. You have a Historic Preservation Commission here, folks? Do you have a Historic Preservation Commission? Another great ingredient in this story. So that now has a Spa Coffee, the lower left. It has a very upscale hair salon, and it has apartments upstairs that run about $1,600 a month. Talking about value added, it's about the details. We have a walking tour in the middle. I should always do this plan if I don't. And so folks can come into the village and follow the walking tour and do a self-guided walking tour. And the bottom picture, that's an alley. So there's a few things in here that are kind of fun to talk about. When we are going to have the full depth reconstruction, we thought as a group, how can we keep the businesses that are here, that are toughing it out, these are our neighbors, how do we keep them alive when people cannot come to their front door? So we looked for parking opportunities behind the businesses. But the problem was, they weren't really as well known, they weren't as upkept. I mean, they were kind of a mess, these back alley type of parking spaces. So we decided, well, this is it. We have to highlight the back doors. The back doors have to become the front doors during road construction. And so the pavers you see, that used to be an old broken up asphalt dark alley between buildings. And we as a volunteer group we called a local contractor, can you excavate that alley? We called a local cement brick person, can you donate materials, and a person to be a project manager. So we got all the pieces. We bought lighting from fundraising efforts. A local artisan, craftsman gentleman does wrought iron work, and he wanted that to be his legacy. So he did that for us. So we called upon the community, and it took your leadership and your inspiration and a plan, and people will come together. We met on a Saturday morning. We all got on our hands and knees and laid bricks. But now we have about, 5 alleys, and we have beautiful archways. And we've named the archways for prominent people in our past. This archway is called Cronenberg Alley. That's the Cronenberg building next to it. And on the wall of the alley is a lovely plaque similar to this one, and it talks about the Cronenberg family. So this is what our historic preservation folks do. The historic plaques, they share our history. I admit, I didn't know our local history as a kid. They didn't teach that in school. I didn't know who the important families were. I didn't know that our Main Street first block with all of the businesses, the folks that ran those businesses and owned those businesses lived in the second block. And that's why the homes are so grand, because they lived here and their businesses were here. All of those things that are authentic, that makes you uniquely Lockport, should be celebrated and educate everyone on that. That's just you. So, I won't go through and read all of these, but all of these things transformed our community. There's no question. We're all very proud of our village. For grant applications, we have now earned a reputation in the state, and the money starts coming because the state wants a sure bet. They're not going to throw their money at a community that isn't prepared for it. How are your plans? Are your plans designed? What do you want to look? How do you want to look? It's having these plans in place and it makes your grant application strong. So the state is not going to give someone money that is not prepared to spend it. Improved pedestrian experience. I cannot tell you, right now in my village, the farmer's market opening day is right now, today. It's hard to find a parking space. And that's a successful problem. What I tell people now are like, we couldn't park. We drove around, for 5 minutes. We couldn't find a place to park. I go, 10 years ago, you could have parked anywhere you wanted. That is a good problem to have. So this morning, the village of Hamburg is going to be bumper to bumper. It's a party there today. Design guidelines, let's see. We have festivals and events all the time. Our music fest is next weekend. And I'll tell you, we have so many businesses and then people investing in our community. It's unbelievable. So, Chuck Vanis, who's here, put together this slide for me. We share code enforcement services with the town of Hamburg. So he actually dug up these figures for me. So 2004, 12 building permits. And you'll see, not even 10 years later, right? Look what's happening in the village of Hamburg. There's confidence, there's businesses opening up that we've only wished for 10 years ago. And amazing restaurants. People biking and walking with strollers and walking their dogs. I see new families moving into the village of Hamburg, faces I've never seen before. Everyone uses the crosswalks. Believe me, cars stop. It's incredible. When you slow traffic down enough and you have this roundabout, you actually can make eye contact with people. You know, it's like a kinder, gentler driving experience. When I cross the street here, I wave to people and say thank you. That happens all the time. I'm not alone. Or they'll make eye contact and they'll say, no, go ahead and cross. I mean, when you slow people down, they become kinder. So, roundabouts. Back in the day, when we decided we were going to advocate for traffic calming, and not just a couple measures, the whole thing. I can't tell you enough. Don't cherry pick one or two elements of traffic calming and think it's going to be, transformational. You got to go all the way. There's no question. If we didn't do roundabouts and kept lights, you'd still have people running yellow trying to beat it. You'd still have a turning lane and, a turning lane on that side and, people making the right on red. It still would not change the way you live every day. So we had very negative back at the beginning. I remember walking my little boy to school. I think he was like 5. And a gentleman was walking the opposite direction and he screamed across the street, "No roundabouts." And it was like, 8 in the morning. And my son said, "Mommy, is that man yelling at you?" I said, "No, just keep walking." So people actually put up political signs in their yards. Someone had them made, like the kind with the 2 wires you stick into the ground, that said "No roundabouts." So it was a little crazy for a while, but people were passionate. This was their place, and they're afraid of change. And honestly, you can run, but you cannot hide. This would have been a very public mess up. Like if we made a mistake, I don't know what would have happened, but we did our homework. I mean, honestly, when you think about a community sticking their neck out and something is so obvious, you better have done your homework. But thankfully, there's roundabouts everywhere. They just really weren't in Western New York. So it was new to us, but they weren't new to the world, certainly. So we absolutely did our homework. So this is only 10 years ago. I showed you my store. It's right out of the picture on the left. This is Main, and this is, East Eden and South Buffalo are the same street. But this is Main Street. There's St. Peter and Paul Church on the left. You can see the steeples behind the tree. The overlook is across from the church, the one that I showed you, the DOT was inspired to put in. But notice there's 1 lane in each direction. The DOT's plan was to widen the street enough that there were turning lanes everywhere. So there'd be a center turn lanes, so all of a sudden you'd add another 12 feet of road that folks had to cross. Well, where are they gonna get that room? We're gonna get 12 feet. Well, 6 feet from that side of the street and 6 feet from that side of the street. So what do you think that does to on-street parking for our businesses? Eliminates it. Until you're way down where the left-hand turn lane begins, before it begins. What do you think would happen see how the street would be almost on the sidewalk? How would you feel walking? Or an elderly person walking, or a child walking? So the DOT's initial plan would eliminate most of the on-street parking and push the street into the sidewalk. This is it now. same intersection. This is Main Street running this way, and then from left to right is Buffalo Street. So the roundabout not only slows down traffic, but we have this amazing, like, don't underestimate the aesthetics. We have this amazing lighting, plantings, people were inspired. That's a private building. I mean, they have plantings all along the side of it. Couple before and afters. We were recipients of 3 consecutive Main Street grants. We were able to help 33 businesses improve their storefronts. Thankfully, we had design guidelines. And we had volunteers. You wonder, who's going to enforce design guidelines? We called on architects from our community, and they volunteer. Every month they meet, architecture review meets. We don't pay them a penny, but they love our community. And you have people that are that minded here as well. You do. So thankfully we had design guidelines, and this is it now. They've actually added on to the back of their building, and they have a beautiful business called Molly and Kate's. Ladies retail, gorgeous fashions, and furniture. More businesses are coming and have come. Before, after. So, as a municipality, you know, the work doesn't end. That's just Maine and Buffalo. We have a problem. We have Camp Road. That's our Hamburg exit. Any of you have been to Hamburg? It's not pretty. So, in our comp plan, we've identified improve our gateway. So your impression, your first impression is better. We have to work on another section of the village, our west end section, which is Lake Street. Prepare for grant opportunities, a trail system. And then, of course, always promote volunteerism. Because a municipality could never pay all the volunteers we have. We have a book of volunteers. Thank goodness for them. So there's our farmer's market in the middle, and that's what it looks like this morning. That's it.
All right, we're going to have a Q&A with both speakers after Jeff is done. And if I can get it out, I'd like to recognize Mayor McCaffrey, who's here this morning. And in participation for a bit of debate today. So next up is Jeff Belt from Olean, New York, and he'll tell you more about himself and what's been happening down there.
Very much for the hospitality this morning. It's great. I live in Buffalo and in Olean, and as it says, I'm co-chair of the Regional Economic Development Council. I joined the council in 2011, I believe, for a 2-year assignment. And I guess in state time, it's like dog years, you know. So there. And then, you know, we were originally led by Howard Zemsky and Satish Tripathi, and Howard Zemsky had been upped. He's now CEO of Economic Development, Empire State Development Corp for the state, and I was shocked, honored, and humbled when he asked me to take his place as co-chair. Really great to be here. You know, Lockport is famous. We all sung about our mule sail on the Erie Canal, and what a beautiful city. And we still have quite a bit of it left. You know, when you consider these assets, I'm going to try to figure out which is the pointer. Yep, there we go. So the F&M, the Bewley Block, this nice new ice arena, Here's where we are in this beautiful building, Palace Theater. We don't have our Palace Theater in Olean. I'm going to show you what happened to it. This is outstanding, Harrison Place. A lot that you can do with that. I mentioned I joined the Economic Development Council in 2011, and I was invited to join because I bought a business down in Olean, a manufacturing company that was slated for closure. Empire State Development helped my partners and I do that acquisition and stand up a new business in that facility, retain the business that we bought with the facility. And Christina Orsi was the executive regional director at the time. She came down, she had meetings with the mayor in Olean about some community projects, and she wanted to meet me because I was one of her stewards, I guess, creations with a little business, and she heard that I was a bit entrepreneurial, which has been spoken pejoratively by my wife, and she thought that what she was going to get was, a manufacturing guy and an entrepreneur, but I wound up in the mayor's meeting talking about community development, a lot of which I learned from my friend Chuck Bannis. And so she asked me to join the Regional Economic Development Council, an innovation of the governor to delegate economic development strategy making to just ranked citizens so that there would be context-sensitive strategy. Now this is New York State's economic development strategy, and I want to tell you it was first articulated right here in Western New York. We created the Western New York Regional Economic Development Strategy based on smart growth and placemaking, fostering a culture of entrepreneurship, and preparing our workforce for new jobs and a new economy. And we also focused on initiatives for our tradable sectors. Those are that brings cash into our community. And when Howard went on to Empire State Development, he took our strategy and turned it into the state strategy. So I think we should all be proud of that. When I joined the council, I wasn't real confident that I was qualified to help contribute to strategy for a whole region, so I went to school. I studied everything I could. I went to the library, I got online, I read articles, and bit by bit I found that I found articles like these. Look at these titles: traffic calming and equity, walkability and property values, how downtown can save America. So, what I determined was that the most effective economic development strategy working in America today is the creation of walkable urban places. And that's no joke. That's a joke. Faulty towers. Anybody remember that? That's just a test to see what I'm talking about. Don't mention the more. Building walkable urban place is economic development. And car dependency actually impoverishes many people. This photo was taken by Chuck Bannis in Olean, and this is one of our before photos, one of our downtown pedestrian crossings. No crossing signals. There is a button in this pole. There's a hole in the back of the pole so you can see that the wires in the button weren't connected to anything. You push that, you pray, and then you run for your life. And we have too much of this, as Laura said, we're in New York State, only 48% of our population even have a driver's license. Chris does not have a driver's license.
I have to drive them everywhere.
Yeah. But look how successful Chris is. So, we need to build places for everybody, especially this little guy here. He makes it. As we were forming our strategy, we had help from UB Regional Institute, and they basically gave us a status of the current situation. And the current situation looked pretty bleak insofar as we were being crushed by property taxes. Actually, the average middle-class New Yorker pays far more in local taxes than they pay in state income taxes. And this is why. Since 1960, Buffalo, Niagara bespread 100% more land while losing 10% of its population. And I put this data together for presentation down in Cattaraugus County, how sprawl is undermining all of our villages. So between 1960 and now, Cattaraugus County actually has a little bit more people. It has more payroll jobs. It has more labor force participation than it had in 1960, the glory days. What happened? Well, all of our villages and our cities, Salamanca and Olean have lost population to unincorporated areas. Ellicottville, suffering from Aspen syndrome, has really seen a plunge in its full-time population. The people who make Ellicottville work have to drive in and take up all the parking spaces before the tourists get there, and it's a real problem for them. I pulled off and took a photo of this sign. I just thought it was emblematic of the problem. We don't have policies that resist sprawl. We frankly don't know what we're doing. We don't know what our problem is or what to do about it. We're really lost in a fog. Here's 122 in cities and villages once again. And as they do so, they may impress upon their elected representatives to introduce policies that would resist sprawl. Now, these policies do exist. They don't exist in America and stuff. And then she'd pick them up, she'd drive them through Allegheny, put them on I-86, the expressway, come past Olean, turn left on the exit in Olean, and avoid downtown altogether, take them through neighborhoods to the hospital, get them to sign the contract, and then they would discover this and say, what did I sign up for, you know? Meanwhile, when I was on the, early in the Economic Development Council, I was talking to Bob Grady. He's the CEO, former CEO of Moog, chairman of Moog now, their most successful CEO. He said, downtown East Aurora is our deal closer. We recruit from all the top colleges. We bring people in to show them the Moog projects, then we take them downtown for lunch. They can't wait to come back and sign the contracts. I looked a little further, and in Corning Glass actually created the Main Street manager, the first Main Street manager in America. That was Norman Mintz. And they invested a tremendous amount of money in restoring downtown Corning after it was flooded in the 1972 Hurricane Agnes flooding. Elmira, sadly, took most of their downtown down through urban removal, and they're really struggling to come back now. They're a downtown revitalization initiative community, and we're wishing the best for them. But Corning Glass uses downtown Corning as their recruiting tool. And so it was with that I rallied the CEOs of Olean behind this little walkable Olean vision for North Union that Chuck created. We took that to the Regional Economic Development Council in 2011, and we were awarded a priority project grant to do the planning for this complete traffic calming urban makeover. And then we won a Tiger grant, $6.5 million transformational infrastructure grant for economic renewal under Federal Highway Administration. And the government created this because they must have channeled the mind of the great Laura Heckathorn, who once said, citizens and businesses like to see a partnership with government that pays them back. And this is precisely what's happening in Olean. We fixed the dangerous road. We had identified in our application that we had about $500,000 per year of damage to property and life and limb. 54-foot crossing distance. Right now, the greatest crossing distance along North Union Street is 20 feet. That's from that wall to that piece of ductwork. So just as Laura said, it's very civilized. You cross the street at will. People will wave you across, and you wave back at them and thank them. We have green infrastructure. We took out 7 sets of traffic lights and put in 5 roundabouts. This summer, we're going to add 1 more roundabout. And now Olean is a downtown revitalization initiative community. We've allocated over half of that money for more traffic calming and placemaking that will bring us at least 2 more roundabouts, hopefully 4. We've got bike lanes, and bike lanes in downtowns improve property values and retail sales. It's been proven again and again. I've got, all kinds of pictures and drives and presentations on that. Property values go up. Our own Laura Cabral Fulton here at UB Regional Institute in her master's program in UB School of Planning found that the most effective way to stabilize and improve urban property values is by building parks and parkways. So we should simply build more parks and parkways if we want to restore our tax base. I'm using, I think, an incorrect version of the slide because there were actually more permits granted in 2010, but as Laura pointed out, Hamburg's makeover increased building permits by 800%. Property values have shot up. Population has stabilized. Hamburg is essentially fully built out, a village of 10,000 people. Hamburg was able to stabilize their property taxes, the green line here, before the governor slapped the 2% property tax cap on, which finally did rein in Orchard Park, which suffers from terrible sprawl and really a lack of any sense of place in their downtown. And isn't that beautiful? So that's a Dan Burden photo. At Laura's recommendation, we brought Dan Burden to Olean, and he helped Chuck and I saw this vision. This was Chuck rendering. This is the before, punctuated by a beautiful Mount Hermon at the end, and this is essentially the after. This was some rendering done by our engineering design consultant, the before, and this is the future look. It's in place now. The trees aren't that big, but it does look very good. This is what it looked like at the end of last summer, just as construction was completing. And it's really, really nice. It used to be that we would never see people walking up here on the north end of downtown where, the historic downtown sort of gives way to the lower density, more suburban style downtown, unless they were out of gas. You might see somebody with a can. Now you never see anybody walking. There's a nice fitness center up here. The YMCA is a few blocks off of downtown. And so we see a lot of people in their workout gear, either doing their warm up or their warm down run. There's one guy, a friend of mine, really funny guy. He's sort of the city historian unofficially. He has a map company, and he's a real firm Republican conservative. And he was at a meeting when I had Dan Burden in town. If you don't know Dan Burden, I don't have a picture of him, but he's about a 75-year-old hippie at this point. I don't think he has ever cut his hair, or his mustache, for that matter. He's got this great walrus. So Dan was giving his 150-slide presentation of befores and afters, and specifically what we need to do and how to do it. And he's a master. And I talked to Earl, the map guy, later, and Earl McElfresh. He's just a great guy. And he said, well, it's interesting and it's pretty compelling, but it'd be a whole lot more convincing if he would only cut his hair. I said, I can do anything, Earl, but I can't do that. You have to look beyond the hair. Well, Earl is out there on North Union most every night. I see him, because I go out for my evening constitutional. So I see him and his wife, Michiko. And he stopped me one time and he said, your whole walkable Olean thing has shaken my worldview. And I said, well, what do you mean, Earl? I said, because he's got a pretty firm world. And he said, I was so dead set against this project, and now I think I like it more than anybody. And I wish I would have brought the paper. It's on my kitchen counter down in Olean. every year the Olean Times-Herald does what they call their Progress Edition. And it's a couple of pages about, who's investing and what's coming and going. It's pretty exciting this year because there actually is a lot of downtown investment in Olean. We don't have the data yet, but it's going to look just like Hamburg's, where a whole lot of nothing for decades, and now suddenly we've got, I don't know, a dozen buildings under renovation in our downtown, and more coming soon. But anyway, at the end of the Progress Edition, on the back page, they always do a little bit of person in the street, microphone interview, and there were 11 little bubbles called out. Of those 11, 9 people, unprompted, commented favorably on the roundabouts and the medians. So lo and behold, and people in Olean were very much against it. Frankly, I hate to say this, Mayor McCafferty, but I think this project cost our mayor her election. But then the mayor who replaced her and originally ran against roundabouts and medians flipped and pushed the project to fruition, and now he's pushing for walkable Olean Phase 2 and Phase 3, which is going to bring yet more roundabouts. We're trying to catch up with Bend, Oregon, who have 31 roundabouts. So we hope to have 10 after about 4 more years. So I wrote here, this is like a linear botanical garden, and it really does unite the city. It gets people from up here around the hospital area and these really kind of fancy homes up on the heights, walking and biking down through downtown. It brings people in from the neighborhoods on either side. Here's another aerial this is State Street. This is the busiest street in Cattaraugus County. It's about 15,000 vehicles a day. Olean only has 14,000 people. So, it's mostly people not from Olean traveling through. And it was really optimized for their benefit, and it kind of cut the community in half. But, this is so attractive that it's kind of drawing people in from the neighborhoods. And it's really vibrant. People are walking the streets all the time. And as Laura said, they're kind of like actors in our downtown. Our DPW commissioner said the traffic counts on North Union are actually up, even though level of service, frankly, is down. And we do get some queuing here at this roundabout during our rush minute at about 5 past 3. So from 5 past 3 to about 7 past 3, we have a traffic jam. But the traffic counts are up, and he thinks it's because people are preferring to drive North Union so they can see who's walking on North Union. Plus, there's more to do on North Union. Storefronts that were vacant are being reactivated. So I've got a little bit about our next initiatives. I'm really pleased to say that this summer, and this is even before Downtown Revitalization Initiative, we have a project to reactivate this little park. Lincoln Park was a beautiful, formal public square. It used to come all the way out to here, like that, but this upper 20% was amputated to try to, straighten State. State used to come in and jog and then go across, but the DOT many years ago chopped into Lincoln Park and made this nice wide State Street with all kinds of turn lanes. And then the park was sort of marooned. It's very formal, sort of an Italian design. And our next project is to make Lincoln Park the centerpiece of our Renaissance. We're going to have a farmer's market, permanent farmer's market pavilion built along the southern edge here. We're going to put a little fence here. It'll be permeable, kind of like the fence that Laura showed at the Overlook, but evocative of the historic fence that used to sit along here where our governor's mansion was before it was taken down for a supermarket and then abandoned by the biggest bank in town, who said they were reinvesting in Olean, and then they proceeded to invest in an office building out of Olean. So when people say they're investing in your city, but they don't invest in the city, they invest out of the city, call them on that. Say, no, you're divesting. Sorry. fix up the gazebo, gonna have a little bistro over here. We don't have enough people to enable the restaurants to afford food trucks, but this will enable them to rent the gazebo for like a week at a time and introduce the menu and participate in the happening downtown. This is what it's going to look like. It's going to be a long, low pavilion with some public restrooms and a southern gateway, and a fence on the front, sort of formalize the space. Now there's going to be a lot more planting. We took the planting out. I don't have the rendering with the planting in. I was searching all over for it last night. But this will have hedges and benches into the hedges, a little children's play area over here. The bistro will be over there. We took the planting out so that we could see the structure and the flow of the sidewalk. Now, Olean was fortunate to be selected as Round 2 Downtown Revitalization Initiative City last year. I'm hoping that Lockport will be in the running. The DRI has approved another year, so please come back and push hard for it. We've had some really good applications. But I think what tipped it for Olean this year was the fact that Olean had applied last year also. Jamestown won the award. Olean came back with a larger scope and really focused on pulling the neighborhoods into the downtown. These are residential neighborhoods. Here, right in here, behind downtown, right over here. As Laura said, some of these neighborhoods have beautiful houses because back in the day, the people who ran the successful businesses in downtown walked to work. So their houses, in many cases, are still standing. We lost a bunch on our First Street, took down all the Victorian houses and put in parking lots. There isn't a single building on First Street behind North Union in the main block. It's just all parking on one side. So there's a huge opportunity for infill. But the streets next beyond, we still have neighborhoods. So now I'm kind of moving into my recommendation phase as I wind up this presentation, and then we're going to go to a discussion. This is from Dan Burden, one of it, or maybe it's from Chuck. Chuck found this, I think. The thing is that if you chew up all these big roads and all these parking lots, and you put in beautiful boulevards and sidewalks protected by street trees and bike lanes and all the rest, your community will come back, and we don't know why that happens. The traffic finds its way. Sometimes it goes away entirely. Sometimes it just melts into your street grid. But even though you're going to diminish your level of service for drivers, they're going to applaud you for doing it after they shake their canes at you for thinking of it. But after it's done, they'll thank you in retrospect. I copied this from Dan Burden. I've got a couple hundred of his slides, and he's a great guy to bring in to make a case in your community. Laura Hackthorne is a great person to come in and make a case in your community. Laura came to Olean a half dozen times, and she had tremendous credibility because, me advocating for all this stuff sounds like, just a passionate guy who's, got time to kill button into, the mayor's business. I don't have jurisdiction, and I'm not elected, so I don't have to, face the voters, and I don't have to, I don't have to do what you do, so it's easy. So I wanted to find a person with jurisdiction to come down and talk to our elected leaders, and Laura did that brilliantly. And then Dan Burden was able to bring case studies and role models from all over the place. Chuck helped immensely. And I think I have a slide coming up speaking to that. So in Lockport, you have a lot of this. You have a lot of parking right on the street. And it should look like this. You should have buildings on the street and parking in the middle of it. And what Dan pointed out to us was that you don't have enough property value right now to justify building all of these buildings. So what he recommends is build liner kiosks and do, as Laura showed, put that green strip, require that little green strip, put some shrubbery up, shrub up those parking lots, create that pedestrian envelope, either with shrubbery or a little liner kiosk like your farmer's market, things like that, just to, redefine the dimensions of a proper, vibrant downtown as you had in the very first black and white aerial view. And then once you begin to rebuild the property value, you'll be able to encourage replacement with, permanent civic structure. So, gosh, I've got an ellipsis. So, start with walkability and public placemaking. That's what I learned when I went to school on economic development. The most effective economic development strategy is traffic calming, walkability, public placemaking. So start there, and then obtain subsidies for preservation and facade improvement. Rezoning may be needed. We hired CD, Banis Design Group. That would be Chuck Banis and Chris Hawley to come down to Olean and do a form-based code overlay. Outstanding. They do a tremendous job. These guys are outstanding in presentation mode. And they really handle a skeptical crowd extremely well. So Mayor, you would love to have them in your council chambers handling the questions, because they're just going to do great, and everybody will thank you for having them come. Despite, their initial fears with change. Chuck once said that the two things people fear most or dislike most are change in the status quo. So, these guys navigate that line very well. After you've done placemaking, walkability, and then preservation, and the facade improvements, then you can begin to plan your new economy. You can figure out what you're going to be when you grow up. And in the case of Corning, they've really branded themselves, with the Gaffer District and their historic downtown. That's what it's all about. It's historic Corning and the upper floor housing. And, Laura said they're paying $1,600 a month in downtown Hamburg. In downtown Corning, they're paying $1,600 a month for a 700 square foot apartment, so over $2 a foot. That is kind of amazing, given that when we began in downtown Olean, our landowners were lucky if they could get 30 cents a foot. We're now up to about 80 cents a foot in downtown Olean, and rising fast. Guelph, Ontario, they built a nice little civic center with an ice skating rink, and you've got a beautiful indoor ice skating rink, so something to think about for infill. So again, let's consider the assets. And I think that, what you'd probably gravitate to first would be the Flight of Five, and then maybe some big recent investments like the arena and Harrison Place, of course. Some historic assets like the F&M and the Bewley Post Office. Now this is the Y, right? I think the Y is moving, but hopefully the building is staying, so hopefully you can get that reused. And the Palace Theater is outstanding. You've got some great little walkable urbanism down through here. The problem is, what I want to draw your attention to is not what's here, but what's here. Look at all these people. You have 20,000 people in Lockport, but I'm just going to bounce back. This walkable urbanism that runs in here, it doesn't reach them. It doesn't extend out into the neighborhood. And, although you've got neighborhood right here, there's a fence, a chain link fence here. They can't get through that. So I would recommend that you think of, opening that up, and you can really see how shaky my hand is with this. And turn this into, like your Larkinville, and make this at least pedestrian accessible and bike accessible, and make this a corridor, and make this a corridor, because right over here you've got some nice residential, and all, as you go into these residential areas here and up here, you've got church steeples. So you have these great terminating vistas, but you don't have, so you've got something to draw people toward that, but you don't have a street for them to walk along. All the investment in walkability is right here in this little island. And I call this sort of Disney World syndrome. A lot of communities think that if they build Main Street USA the way Disney did it, and with 150 acres of parking on the edge, the people are going to park, they're going to walk in, and kaboom, it's Main Street USA. Real people don't do that. We only do it when we go to Disney World. What real people do is they live here and they walk down here to buy ice cream. But I don't think the people here do walk down here to buy ice cream very often, even though it's 1, 2, 3, 4 blocks. They should, but it's not a pleasant walk. And these people here, they can't really walk from here to the palace. They probably get in their car, drive, park there, and then go to the palace. Why not give them a nice way to walk down to the palace? And I know that you're thinking of some infill, and Mayor, we talked about, putting a hotel here or here. I'm saying here. Infill that parking lot and leave this alone. This could be like that 18 Mile Creek overlook sometime, but you don't really need to build out, and there's not a lot to connect to down here. But if you can, infill all this and connect in these neighborhoods, I think that you could really, start to leverage the population that you already have. Because another great commentator and planning guru once said that a place worth visiting is usually a nice place to live. And I think back to one of Laura's slides, she had 12 bullet points on, what you need to do to activate your community. And I counted them, and I read them, and not one of them said anything about tourists or tourism. So I think that in some respects, the communities, particularly in Niagara County, are misleading themselves to pursue tourists because there's such a huge tourism magnet called Niagara Falls nearby, and and it's distracting, and it's causing us to not look at the assets that stand right before us, and those are the people who live out in these neighborhoods. So I would advocate that the Flight of Five is great, and it's a tourism asset, and so people will come to see that, but I think that you're going to get closer to your goal faster if you focus on creating walkable connections into your own neighborhoods, draw your own people into your downtown. Those people will activate your streets in your downtown. They'll add property value. They'll foster the activity that's needed to justify the investment in infill. And then as that happens, the tourists will then want to follow. And I think I'm right on this point because I also heard Joe O'Reilly, the great mayor of Charleston, South Carolina, say essentially the same thing. When he was elected mayor, he put a moratorium on demolitions. The city was falling apart. In his slideshow, he had a picture of one three-story shotgun house that was so dilapidated that it was leaning over the sidewalk and it was held up by a dead tree and a power pole. And his code enforcement officer wanted to get it down. He said, it's just a life safety hazard. And he said, no, moratorium means moratorium, no demolitions. You can go out and you can prop it up, but you can't pull it down. And then in his next slide, of course, he showed that house as it is today, and it's beautiful and it's all restored. And he said, this thing just sold for $800,000, and that was about 10 years ago. So it's probably 1.8 million now. And so what he did was he started first by saving the assets that they had in Charleston and making it a really nice city for the people who were already living there, even though the people were poor. they were downtrodden, and they had pretty much given up on their community, but he focused on his established residents, and then on that basis, Charleston is a tourist mecca. It's almost too successful. So that's it. Walkability, traffic calming, placemaking. I think Hamburg would be a great role model for Lockport. Preservation, adaptive reuse and infill. Make it easy and attractive for your own residents to become tourists in your downtown, and the rest will take care of itself, in my opinion. Thank you.
Yeah, we're going to have a Q&A session. I don't know how we're doing on time, Jerry and Phil.
I think we're pretty late.
I think we're okay. Yeah, we're about a half, we're still within our buffer zone, so we're good. Would you guys like to sit up front or just field questions from?
I don't mind just, I don't mind standing around, because you might want us to speak in the microphone.
Yeah.
The first word you're down to is it actual lead brick?
Are you talking about the alleyway?
The alleyway along the street, anywhere it looks like it's brick, is it actual brick?
Our original brick roadways were lifted out during the road reconstruction. We have pavement on our main street.
Motorized wheelchair. I never saw him on the sidewalk. I never noticed him. And I didn't even notice him when he was in front of my car. I only noticed him when he was, beyond the front bumper. That's the problem with traffic lights. I really think they should be, literally banned in our downtown areas. And Brian's role model for that would be Queenstown, New Zealand. So I would recommend, and the mayor is not here to give his recommendation, that you go to Queenstown, New Zealand and see how they remove every single traffic light from their city in the interest of pedestrian safety. And they put in little mini roundabouts that are really like a pan lid, so the big road train trucks that they use down there hauling either lumber or sheep can go right over the top of them, but the pedestrians have a little pedestrian crossing island, and the drivers are always keeping their eyes on the road and not looking up in the air and running into people. Is that kind of what you were getting at? But pedestrian safety is really the key to downtown revitalization. If the pedestrians don't feel safe, they won't walk, and if they won't walk, then they'll demand more parking, and if they demand more parking, you gotta take more buildings down. Pretty soon you don't have a downtown, you've got a parking lot.
This is for Jeff and Laura both. You've done a wonderful job of showing us the economic and environmental changes that have been a result of your process. Two other key ingredients in healthy communities are the health of the citizens and the social capital that comes out of the process. Have you considered adding that to your presentation?
The social experience is, I guess that is very much a part of the presentation. I probably didn't touch upon it as much as I should. It's incredible how cohesive and how friendly, and Main Street is supposed to be a social experience. I remember when I used to work at the Livable company many years ago, I took a gentleman from Mexico City. I was supposed to, take him to dinner. And he said, bring me to your piazza. Bring me to your social gathering place so I can people watch. And there wasn't any place. Main Street in Buffalo certainly was deserted. So the village of Hamburg has very much become a social space. And we designed in public gathering spaces. We have little green pocket parks all through the village of Hamburg. And so there is a lot of, we are social beings, and FaceTime and eye contact is all very important. And by promoting the outdoor dining and making it walkable, it really, there's such a social experience with it. You get a lot out of it.
I'd like to take that question from the perspective of social and economic equity. Olean is a city of poverty. Everybody in Olean's schools is eligible for a free lunch and free breakfast due to our average income in the district. We're right in the opioid addiction zone down there. Last year we had a higher murder rate than New York City. We don't have a high murder rate, but New York City has never been safer. So it's, Olean is a charming little city. It's not dangerous, but it is very poor. And, and I contrast that with both Corning and Hamburg. Corning has, Fortune 500 headquarters, and Hamburg is a prosperous suburb of Buffalo. But what we are achieving already in Olean is social and economic equity. We're giving the people who are very poor access to jobs, to education, to health care without the need for a car. What we found in Cattaraugus County was that people living in poverty spend over 40% of their income on transportation. And we don't have a good public transportation system down there. Frankly, our public transportation is essentially a paratransportation system, and it's very sporadic. There just isn't enough population density to run. I think we have like 3 buses running 6 loops, so you can imagine how often they loop. Dan Burton's research corroborated this. He found that in the United States, the people in the 20th percentile of income and below spend over 40% of their income on transportation. So, car dependency takes that first rung of the ladder of economic mobility out of reach of most people. And so, we feel that, bringing people back into compact communities that are walkable, that are bikeable, is a matter of social equity, economic equity, and its economic opportunity. In Olean, we concluded very quickly that we have to build our new economy on the backs of the people that we have. I had some slides in there about, recruiting and attracting. Yeah, we do need to do that. We have to attract doctors. We don't have a medical school in Olean. So there are certain elite players in our local economy whom we need to attract from outside. But we really need to build our next economy on the generation of people who already live there. And if they're too poor to get to school, if they're too poor to be able to, manage their health, or if they're too poor to even get to work, they're not going to be participants. And then our employers leave, and we'll continue to spin down with it. And you're seeing that in a lot of rural communities. I can go on and on, but I think I more than answered the question. Sorry.
Actually, I do have a question that sort of pertains to that. Where are your public schools located? Are they out in a field in the middle of nowhere, or are they in the village or the city?
Really glad you asked that one. In Olean, let me see if I can capture one here. Okay. This building right here is Olean High, and then right behind it is Olean Middle School. The elementary schools are in the wings. There's one way down here, and there's one way over on this side, east and west. But our schools in the city of Olean are walkable, bikeable. Not the case in many of these rural communities. What happens is that in school consolidation, you don't want to favor one community over the other, so you build a new school that doesn't help either community, and nobody can walk to it. That's what happened in Allegheny Limestone and Cuba Rushford, 2 districts near Olean. I'm trying, I'm with you, I argue against it whenever I can.
In the village or city area. a lot of the, and you are very much in a countryside area, a lot of rural communities around you. And schools are a place to congregate, they're a place for community, and if you can walk to them, and we have fat kids. One of the reasons we have fat kids is they get up and they get on a school bus. They go to school, they eat Pop-Tarts for breakfast, and they have probably McDonald's-type hamburgers for lunch, and then we wonder why the kids are getting late. And it also breaks down the community. It's tough for a parent who doesn't have transportation and is very low income to get to the school to discuss their child. If the school is not if you can't walk to it or bicycle to it, it's a very tough situation, I think. And I wonder about Lockport. I know that your high school is on the outskirts. Do you have any elementary schools that are in the city?
Yeah.
Anna Merritt's relatively close.
Anna Merritt and Roy B. Kelly are very close. I know a lot of people who walk to both of them. And North Park is and Emmett, depending on where you live.
One of the elementary schools could be described as being far west side, and the other one could be described as being east-northeast, or east-southeast. That's the good news, they're in the city limits. The bad news is over the course of the last decade or so, we've seen 3 of our old-time elementary schools that are right in the heart of the neighborhoods, they have closed. But the middle schools, which have now split up even more than the just 3 middle schools, are still very much in the city in that age group. The high school's in the city limits, but it is on the edge. But they're not, it's not bad.
What we like to say in the village is we have free-range kids. That's a goal. Like when we were kids, right? Come home in the street lights, come on. So it helps in design decisions. You design for people and kids.
I'd like to point out, if everyone can hear me, whenever I've given tours of the village of Hamburg, I do this little demo where I blindfold myself and just wander out into the street. And cars always stop. It's amazing how the design has changed.
Up until now.
That behavior.
So far, so good.
Wow.
But the traffic moves so slowly and so civilly there, simply because of the design of the space, that you get all of that great behavior. The drivers become civil, the pedestrians, other people you meet become much more civil.
Yeah, it's definitely a sense of place kind of thing. Like when we all go to Niagara on the Lake, I mean, nothing said, there's no flashing a sign that says, please slow and stare at buildings and flowers. But we all do it. You know, it's just, and it's like you've entered Oz, you know, and we wanted the Village of Hamburg to be that way too. So gateway branding, you know, there's a whole other subject. When you cross into, you know, whatever you define as your, you know, your Lockport border, you want it to be like you're entering this amazing place, and everyone will slow down and look.
Yeah, what's the speed limit in
30.
30?
But really comment on that.
Even on
30.
When you do traffic calming correctly, you don't need speed limits. I happen to live in Switzerland for a year, and they don't use speed limit signs in Switzerland unless there's a construction zone. They simply design the roads for the speed that you're supposed to travel. And so our speed limit in Olean is also 30, but you'll never see anybody doing 30 on Union Street. You know, 20, maybe 25, and then, you know, as they approach the roundabouts, they're back down in the 10 to 15 mile an hour range. And we do an event called Strollean through the summer. Everybody comes out, and, you know, it's all pop-up retail through downtown. And, you know, I was down at one of the bulb outs at one of the roundabouts, and they had a little face painting tent, so all the kids were lined up for face painting, and they can't really wait in line, so some of them were doing cartwheels and somersaults on that little lawn of bulb out. And we parents were just all standing around in a huddle, talking to each other and ignoring our kids. And I looked up and there was an 18-wheeler, going through the roundabout, just in its lowest gear, just chugging through, and kids are cartwheeling and somersaulting about, 10 or 15 feet away. And nobody was worried, and we didn't even hear it because it's so nice and quiet. So it makes a huge difference. About a month after, I had a meeting in the little village of Cuba, and it was at the coffee shop. We were sitting outside, and it's near a traffic light. And every time the light turned green or red, we would have to interrupt our conversation because there'd be noise from cars and trucks taking off, or noise from trucks in their Jake brake slowing down for the lights. So if you remove the traffic lights and put in roundabouts, you're probably going to drop the noise level on your street by half or more, and everybody will feel very safe being, right on the sidewalks and even in the little green spaces that you create around your roundabouts. And you won't need speed limit signs, so it'll save some money.
One of the things I've always said is if you got a stretch of road where cars are going too fast, and you're concerned about it, you probably don't have a signage problem. You have a design problem. So approach the problem from that point of view. Design the road and the space for the behavior that you want. And one of our big problems in this country is we have a 35 mile an hour speed limit or a 30 mile an hour speed limit on a road that's designed for 50 or 60. That's kind of what we've done in this country.
I just have a comment. So, this is for Laura. I'm on the zoning board of appeals for the city of Buffalo, and I've seen a lot of talks. But I just wanted to say that a motherly perspective on planning is something that not a lot of people see or hear. And I was just on my phone the entire time writing down things that you were saying and I just have to say thank you, because it's typically, and no offense, Jeff, you're great. Typically dudes, right?
Yeah.
No, yeah. Oh, no, yeah, great. But just the way that you're able to say some of these things really helped. Just personally, I don't have kids, but it helped me, and I think that it can really help people wrap their minds around communities in a different way. And it's just like an angle of the conversation that I have very rarely heard. I hear people talk every meeting, zoning board meeting. It's just the focus that you had is so important. I feel like you should go around teaching and talking everywhere, I'm just saying, and you develop activist groups about how to effectively communicate their concerns. Because so many people come up and they're just so angry. But when you say, well, would a child, hang out at this corner, that is a different perspective that no one really says. I just had to say it because we're over here whispering money, and I'm going, oh my God, Jeff, I've seen Karen talk to a zillion times, great, amazing, super respectful, but, the womanly, mom perspective is so important.
Thank you. I have to say, it's because, when you think about it, I'm not the typical, politician. It actually freaks me out when people call me a politician. I'm taken aback like they threw water in my face or something. But because I started out as, I'm a public servant. And I started out as a parent, and I volunteered. And so it was very organic. So that's why I'm approaching it from a different place. Thank you. That lovely comment. Thank you.
So how, as a youthful community citizen, how can I use the walkability and accessibility with what we have right now in Lockport? What's my biggest point of emphasis before any of this good stuff happens? I think that walkability doesn't come out of a need or a want. Of a need. So if there's no Uber or there's no transportation, now I'm walking. So I live 18 minutes away from downtown Lockport, which is to come to work every day. The only reason I'm not driving is because it's not there, and I don't walk because there's no way to get to my house besides walking. How do I use that point of emphasis? We're only 15 minutes away from downtown. Why drive a car? With what's available right now, so that if I can use that point of emphasis for people to see with what's available, they could probably see that bigger picture a little bit better, as opposed to saying, why don't you walk this when it's nice and straight, as opposed to why can't we walk it right now and then see those changes, adapt as we move along.
Well, money's a big thing, right? So I can, don't want to hog the microphone, Jeff, stuff, but I can start by saying there's easy things you can do. So is your main street a state street or a municipal street?
Municipal.
Municipal. So striping, paint is cheap. In the village of Hamburg, we went to 10-foot lanes, 10-foot drive lanes. And it slows, you know, that whole field of vision, you feel more constricted, so you slow down. There's other inexpensive things like, you know, so you can paint, if you have room, you can paint bike lanes. Now in the village of Hamburg, we don't have a legal lane, enough room to call it a bike lane, so we call it a safety lane. So paint, easy. You know, in the village, we are committed to 5-foot sidewalks. That's so when you're walking with someone, you can walk side by side. You know, sometimes you're taking a walk in the street, the sidewalk's not, and like one person kind of has to walk behind. So you can commit, you know, there's different things that can slowly happen, but I would say, you know, painting a bike lane would be cheap.
Because I have a perspective, Jessica and I went to a meeting in Buffalo and made a parking garage that was almost 15 minutes away from our meeting. We didn't bat an eye. We parked in that parking garage, we stepped out of it, we walked, and we didn't try it out. And we have a problem behind Harrison Place. That's our like target community for our farmers market. And when we post, we say, okay, park in the social services lot. Realistically, we should be saying, walk on down to the farmers market, but we can't grasp that. We can't find that opportunity or what it is about that allows that lower income, SNAP available, to have all these benefits of a farmer's market to be there. And that's right behind you. And you said, there's that fence that almost makes it a barrier, but that's our target audience. We want, as much as we want influential, white people shopping and spending money, we want the people who need this nourishment, who need this opportunity. And we're offering it, and we're finding a hard time getting it. So that's just
Part of it is a culture change, and that takes years. You know, I have people that say, well, there's no parking in front of your store, so I didn't stop. I kept driving. And I'm like, oh my God, really? I said, you know, when you park at the mall, you walk, you know, 3 blocks to the mall. But part of it is changing that idea of, and I said, I want you to walk. I want you to park a block away and walk, because then you become part of the theater. You become an actor in the Main Street play. And we want to see you walk, because it, you know, adds life to my street. So park far away and walk. But it's kind of like the Johnny Adams seed. You know, you're sprinkling these ideas, and you're hoping that they grow. Yes, sir.
I just have to something that the barriers you're talking about for downtown. I grew up on Lower Town and North End. And a lot of those barriers are put in because of the neighborhoods where I grew up, there was multiracial black and poor white kids. And going forward, I think it's kind of like a boogeyman in the room in Lockport, is how to embrace and be open to those who are different. And I said black, but wealthy white people. We already have people here, not necessarily wealthy or white. You have to. That's a big problem, I think, with getting those neighborhoods to come into downtown. Because for so many years, there was barriers. Like, oh boy, I remember growing up. But they were specifically done with fences. Stay out. We don't want you here.
You know, gosh, I wish I was an expert on that. The village of Hamburg is like 99% white. So I haven't had to, you know, go against that challenge. I don't know. Do you have anything to add about that?
I think that a lot of road infrastructure was built, maybe not intentionally to provide a barrier, but that might have been an unintended consequence of it. And that's what we're trying to take down in Olean, is to remove the physical barriers to, you know, intercourse between neighborhoods. And, you know, there's a lot of research on this, which I've read. I wouldn't call myself an expert, but I felt, you know, that it was incumbent that I read it, at least as, you know, co-chair of the Regional Economic Development Council, that, you know, balkanized neighborhoods are not good for the rich or the poor. You know, your rich kids grow up without empathy, and your poor kids grow up without the ability to pattern on, you know, certain successful role models of the wealthier communities. And if you look at the traditional villages, you'll see where, neighborhoods that were, middle class, even lower middle class, would have, a really nice house in it all of a sudden. That was, Doc Smith's house or something. The doctors lived in the neighborhood. Now they live up on the hill. But, through returning to, walkability and bikeability, we're in Olean beginning to bring everybody down into the community together. And it just doesn't, I don't think that there was a real, maybe I'm being overly generous, an intention to segregate, but it happened, and now we're trying to desegregate. And integration is the solution to equality and upward mobility. So, we have to, but on the other hand, birds of a feather flock together. So you have to always be working on integration. I just want to connect it a little bit to what you were saying, sir. I think that you would like to influence public opinion and discourse, and I concur with Bernice. You need a person like Laura to come to the conversation. This is what I learned in Olean, because trying to convince the public with a lot of facts, and I'm an engineer, and detail is not effective. You have to have somebody who, like Laura, is able to relate both from sort of that motherly, I think you said, human perspective, and also as a trustee, talk to the people with actual jurisdiction and reassure them that it's going to be fine, and they'll get through the initial objection, and then they'll be praised, and they're still electing her in Hamburg, after undertaking one of the greatest acts of civic courage that we have in our entire region.
You said you want no setback or very little setback for the Main Street stores and 5-foot sidewalks. So where do you put your outside then?
That's a good one. We actually allow, oh yeah, probably could. Yeah, we actually allow the restaurants to encroach on the sidewalk.
That's what I was saying.
We do. So as long as folks can still pass and get around them, and we're not pushing them into the street, we kind of turn like a little bit of a blind eye. It's not written there, but we really want to be business friendly, and we want Main Street to be our living room. So we make every accommodation to draw people to that space to share and interact. Yes.
A 5 foot is kind of, you can have much wider sidewalks. You have a space for it, go for it.
Well, Olean has very wide, right? You have very wide sidewalks.
15 feet.
Yeah.
Oh, which would be a lot more accommodating.
Yeah.
What some communities do across the country, that I've seen, if they don't have room for a very large sidewalk, even after doing these great traffic calming projects, the way Village Hamburg might, the corners typically have in any such project a kick out or a curb extension to narrow the crossing distance. And you can kind of see that idea in Hamburg, on the right hand side. See how the curb comes out, so it narrows the crossing distance before the intersection. That is a great spot to put plantings, and it's also a great spot to put outdoor dining. So the corner business here can really take advantage of that as public space.
Which, yeah, we've done. We have a great restaurant that has outdoor dining. And now we have one rooftop dining, and a second business is going in this summer with the second rooftop dining. So we're so excited about that.
How do you deal with skateboarding?
It's really not it's kind of out. We don't really have a lot of skateboards. Kids, those things come and go. So we don't really have a skateboard. Although I remember designing the overlook, the cement benches that kind of go around the overlook. We did put like these cement humps here and there, 2 inches, and I don't even know the real word for them, but I think they're skateboard preventers. So, but that's kind of gone by the wayside.
Oh, another thing I wanted to mention too, just about the cost of driving. Anyone know how much it costs to, on average, to maintain a car per year in the it shocked me when I heard this a few years back. It's just over $10,000. Right? So building a walkable downtown is not going to eliminate everybody's requirement to drive for other things in their lives, right? But if we can start chipping away at it, and instead of what is it, 14 car trips the average American family makes per day, separate trips per day, if you can start knocking away at that and get it down to 12 or 8 or 7, right? You can decrease your cost of ownership significantly. And if you build yourself a nice walkable downtown, it only takes a few blocks to bring walkability. That also becomes a tool to diminish driving. Some people may have to drive in, and but you park once and you can walk. Instead of driving between all your different destinations, you can downtown, where the way light or shopping or some strip mall on transit roads. So all this stuff starts to work together. And of course, downtown is a place where everybody, all the neighborhoods, the people that live in the neighborhoods, regardless of their diversity, meet. Downtown becomes that kind of meeting space. So, maybe one neighborhood doesn't like the other, there's some demographic problems or something, right? If you have a social downtown, at the very least, it starts to at least unisolate people. So you start to rub elbows with some of those people who you might not like, or might not think you like.
Well, just, we both mentioned the commercial building licenses as a metric that kind of shows some growth. Are there other big ones that we could look at, or what are they, where would I grab them?
Well, in the village, the other one was our accident rates. So 62% drop in crashes, and when it happened, they were like little fender benders, and
it was over a 90% drop in fatal accidents.
Yes.
And roundabouts.
Because driver behavior was changed. Speeds were lowered, no more T-bone crash possibilities because it's a roundabout.
And they actually move more traffic than the old signalized streets
Yes,
did.
smooth and steady. Yeah.
Where do you get that data?
Well, for the building permits, Chuck actually dug up that data. He went down to the Hamburg Town Hall and dug through records, so thank you for that. I wouldn't do that.
It's kind of fun.
And the data on the crashes was our police department actually got that data. And actually, there's a lot to be seen on the Village of Hamburg website. A lot of people ask us about like our building design guidelines, our zoning, all of that stuff, our planning documents, and we put them online just for our community.
Those design guidelines are really hammered down.
Yeah, big time.
Really important. I may have missed it, but did you contract out somebody to make those for Hamburg, or was
I
it
did. No. So we have a historic preservation commission, and we had a reconnaissance level survey done. That's where they kind of take inventory of all your buildings, which that's probably another step that you could do. And in the recommendation section, because you pay for all these planning documents and you better use them, right? Or you're wasting your money on the shelf. And they said that you need design guidelines. So that's where I, took my cue and, go to your board, you say we need these, and you convince them, and then you hire somebody. And so we hired Bob Corby, the mayor of Pittsburgh, is also an architect by trade, and in the entirety of Pittsburgh is a historic preservation district. So he was, really happy to work with us, and they're online, so you can check it out, use it as a model. The worst thing to do is, what if you bought this amazing building in your downtown? It kind of protects you as a property owner from insensitive investment next door. Because what if you put all, oh my gosh, I'm going to put all my money into this building, I'm going to restore it, it's going to be gorgeous. And the guy next door does the same. He calls his uncle from the town over, and he's like, redo this building. It's almost like if you're going to redo a kitchen or something, and you have an architect design it, or you have some guy who's come in and do what he thinks he should do. I mean, you want, at the end of the day, you want to have something you'll be proud of. And so design guidelines really help you as an investor. It gives you some comfort level that next door you're not going to have like this, someone's not going to drive it all over the front of their building. So yes, it guides investment without enforcing cookie cutter sameness. Some people think like design guidelines are going to tell me how to design my building. No, it just gives you some framework to protect your investment from, and help you and give you, because not everyone's born knowing, not everyone's an architect. So it helps us all. It's a guide.
And another thing I might note is most of our beautiful downtowns, historic downtowns that we have everywhere, were built on the same pattern, same lot widths, 20, 25 foot wide lots, using pattern books from the period, from the 1800s. So look at the variety of buildings along our historic main streets everywhere. So design guidelines of any kind don't promote that cookie cutter. You can get a ton of variety within an envelope of good basic rules.
And a lot of us grew up in that ugly 60s, 70s, 80s, horrible, and that's what we think is normal. Probably not.
Anything else?
Jeff, you mentioned a pretty hot topic, the YMCA moves. What could fill the space of that building where you do have kids going in there, and like my daughter goes to summer camp there, and they're walking down the streets of Lockport, checking things out, going to the parks. That's, with them moving out of downtown, that is going to feel like a little bit of a hole there. Something's really missing, in my opinion. Like what could go in, what could fill that same space? Any ideas?
Any ideas, Brian?
Lots of ideas. I think whether it is something for kids or not, certainly there's a gap in services with them leaving and where they're going. The people that go to the Y right now are not going to have access to it because they're taking it to an area that's not particularly walkable, certainly not the neighborhood that it was servicing before. That said, the building has a lot of potential. It can be difficult as far as ADAs. It has I think I've heard there's 16 different levels. And it's a 3-story building, right? And just because of the way that it was built and expanded upon, but it certainly has a lot of potential. And I think it's something that once we identify, or once someone identifies himself as a purchaser or developer, I think that's when we'll see, really what the end use of it is. But it will be a saying vague, just making it sound terrible, but it will be an opportunity property in the very near future, and I'm excited to see, especially with the arena right here, the palace here, this property, obviously owned by a slow development. We've seen what they did with 57 Canal Street right by Flood 5. Kind of excited about what this corridor right here can be for kind of a catalyst for future development. And I think when we walk around, the last time we did James Walk, we kind of stood across the street here and appreciated a little bit about what this spot is. But just to get back to your point, it's certainly a gap that hopefully we can, between the arena, the palace as cultural assets for us, we can find a way to fill the gap. It is certainly a gap.
And just to add to that, if you notice what Jeff showed on one of the maps earlier, I'll call it the Elm Street corridor. That's exactly what plays into that. Right through here, the Y is, where the post office is, where the palace is, the Harrison Place is, where the farmers market is, that we talked about, Elm Street coming through from that neighborhood, right straight through here, down to the arena. So yes, that should be a hot property in the not too distant future.
Keep in mind too that if you want to create a walkable downtown, one block or even half a block of parking or bad development can kill the walkability. Yeah. So if you want to create those connections to the innermost neighborhoods here, concentrate on one or two really important spines, connections into those neighborhoods, and make them really, really nice. Make them very special.
I have a question about the movement of the YMCA. Who involved with the YMCA dictated that they would move?
I don't think there's no one here that could probably address that directly as part
Okay,
of
was
the
it
why,
somebody
but
here?
I've
Was
been a
it
member there
outside?
for 30 years, and it goes back 25 years ago that they decided that they wanted to move out and
actually either got the land dirt cheap or it was donated. If anybody knows better on this, then correct me. But there was a mindset from the beginning that they weren't going to stay down here. My wife was actually on the board at the time, just one of the centers. They could never pull it off on their own. They tried and tried and tried, they just would not do it in mind. And no one was going to change their mind. When all of this started, with Canal Street and a few other things going on down here, going back in the range of about 2008, 2011, the city approached them again about changing their minds. In all fairness to them, the administration that was in power at the time in the 1990s basically didn't see why they'd want to stay downtown. We were dealing with that too. That's 25 years ago. That has changed dramatically. We approached them again. We showed them how to take exactly what they want to do out there, fit it in over here, next to where the arena is, on the other side of the tracks. The city owns a great deal of land, and I mean, they basically wouldn't even speak to us. The mindset was already there. Now, in fairness to them, and I'll say this to somebody who's a member of the Y, who's used Ys all over the country, it seems to be a national mindset with the YMCA. I've seen abandoned Ys in inner cities that aren't even half the age of this place. You can look at the skyline of the building and determine what each use is. Built in the last 40 years, and they've packed up and moved out to a suburban Y. But again, we simply couldn't get them to change their mind. And once they merged with Buffalo Niagara YMCA said, we want no part of this building. And they are running the show now.
Kevin, where's it going?
It's going on Center Drive, essentially behind where Walmart and Tops are. So that, I mean, it's unfortunate, it's almost tragic, but the ship has sailed. And we've got to deal with that now.
So now you need to find another person or entity to go into that space that is community involved, child involved, because the YMCA is where you learn to swim, it's where you learn to play basketball, it's where you go to after-school programs, and it's great for senior citizens, but trying to find that entity to go in there, it's going to be tough.
I have a comment on that. And you do the rest of this right, you're not going to have any problem finding someone to fill that space, and the Y 10 years from now is going to be sorry they left.
Look at the Washington Hundred. I mean, that was a abandoned school. It was empty. It seemed inaccessible. There's rooms upon rooms that needed teachers and faculty, and it's an ultimate physique, one of our best hometown staff. It was took that opportunity and used it to their advantage.
Similar but not the same, we're talking about the school in East End, 1920 school building. I have 4 children go to elementary school there. They can walk 3 blocks to school. I mean, I was among the saddest to see it go. But when that ship sailed, we did find somebody that was willing to take the space. We did quite fully got to go a little more around. But there's an independent yoga studio in there and a fabulous fitness center, which is where I'll be walking to 3 blocks away until they go to the library. That's what it's like.
Well, we've got a couple developers here, so, there's a building seeming to be vacant, a great building in downtown Lockport.
Come on.
So see it.
We'll walk there on the walk. Any other questions? Okay, well, I guess we're gonna about half hour behind the printed schedule. So we're gonna take a half hour break now, and then we'll form up for the walks. Looks like we're probably just gonna have maybe 2 groups.